desire for them that's not fulfilled, and all the while completely unaware that it's only me. I'm the only one here. It can be a frightening thought. If we're all one, as the awakened say, then that is the case. We're living life after lifetime as different people interacting with ourselves. And that could bring us together. I'm going to shift gears and perhaps come back to that. So, a large number of people have an insecure attachment to their parents. The parents are either not approving or they're only conditionally approving. And parents often think they have to be that way in order to create discipline. And maybe they do. I'm not even going to argue the point. If we grow up with thoughts of negative self-worth or conditional self-worth, if we feel the need to blame ourselves for our parents being upset, even if they're not upset with us directly, we blame ourselves anyway. We have to do that as children, otherwise we don't have any feeling of control. So the only way we can get control when we're a child is often to simply say, this is all my fault, I am bad. Because if I'm bad, then I can fix that. If it's due to me, then I can fix that. And it's a short-term solution, but creates a long-term, lifelong problem, which is that we are not present for ourselves when the part of our mind that developed in that moment exercises its power. In other words, the neurons fire and it says, you screwed up, you're bad, you're worthless, or you would be better if you did X, Y, and Z, if you could get X, Y, and Z, if you can get rid of X, Y, and Z, if you could change X, Y, and Z. And because it had so much power initially, and we haven't found a way to replace it, it remains the internal negative controlling parent, negative nurturing parent, and often manifests as negative adaptive child saying, I've got to adapt or I've got to obey, I've got to conform or I'll be in trouble, or negative free child, I must conquer, I must escape. These are symbolized as Sphere 8 on the Tree of Life, Hermetic Kabbalah, with negative adaptive child, and Sphere 7, negative free child. But it also could be positive. Positive free child is just playful, not worried about the rules, but not intending to be mean or violate anyone's feelings or regulations. They're just not really into rules and regulations and being limited. And that's where expansion happens. That's where purpose can happen. That's where revolutionary change can happen. But often when it gets triggered, then the adaptive child puts forth, well, maybe we should follow the rules, maybe we should obey, maybe we should conform, not necessarily out of fear, but could be out of love. But because humans are at lower consciousness, we have fears and desires, we have an integrated anger, we have an integrated, and we're full of stories, identification, and attachment. It often goes in those spheres to the negative. And so stories and mythologies are one way that we can address this. The other is state experiences, changes of your state of consciousness, which can happen without a story. And there's an interplay between these two things that are often occurring. Stories are maybe attempts, often, to religion, to recreate, to relink. In this particular scenario, we're speaking about the Greys and the principles that came to them from this angelic figure in their dimension, and how it allowed them to become an advanced race, not just technologically, but on a spiritual level. We don't think of them as particularly emotional, but we have no idea whether they're emotional or not. We don't even know if they exist or not. We're just using this as a story. And often storytellers go into this idea of who built the pyramids. So could we tweak the story a little bit with due respect if there's a reality out there, to permit us to have a usefulness to higher principles. And the top of the pyramid is about making this moment about this moment. And those of us who are interested in high moral standards and kindness and love and peace and unity and respecting other people, we may feel like making this moment about this moment does not seem to be very lofty. But I will suggest to you, and that's, I'm putting it on the angelic figure in the grays to carry this forth in my story, that we cannot make this moment about this moment unless we have these higher principles operating. And if we are not making this moment about this moment, then the thoughts begin to run. The thoughts begin to run, and they're usually negative adaptive child, negative free child, negative nurturing parent, negative controlling parent, if we're being ruled by stories, identification, and labels and attachments that are linked to fears and desires and anger and regret and guilt. In other words, all based on an idea of there's not one person, that we're all different people, and then therefore I should have fear, anger, desire, guilt, and regret, and shame towards those people. And those people need to give me something. On a biological, societal level, maybe that's all true. But on a spiritual level, if we're all one, then this is bringing our consciousness down to not see that. And so they're suffering, perhaps as a guide or an inspiration to move to something higher, where we do see we're all one, where we thank, to humbly appreciate not knowing, where we have unconditional self-acceptance, unconditional positive self-regard. And with that, then we can make this moment about this moment. So the making this moment about this moment is sort of our organizing principle, our pinnacle of the pyramid. And in our story, why the pyramids were created, not in order to house the rulers, but as a symbol to an idea and an ideology that would raise human consciousness and bring us to seeing that we're all one, and fulfill this obligation to make this moment about this moment. Typically, we don't fulfill this obligation, this vow of obedience. Instead, we get lost into issues around poverty, how much money I have, is it enough money, how can I get more money, where should I spend my money, all this material vision, and yet money actually isn't a material thing, it's energetic, which is kind of weird. And then the other vow that's broken is chastity, where we want to be desired and we have desires. And the reason for these desires to come, this desire to be seen as important or attractive, is going back to our original point, this insecure attachment with the parent. Because if there's all this negative messages about our self-worth, or conditional messages about our self-worth, then we are programmed to want to have ego enhancement. We're programmed to want people to be attracted to us, respecting us, drawn to us. But instead, what the pyramids in my story are about is about bringing respect to the thoughts themselves. We disrespect the thoughts when we don't make this moment about this moment. When we're not fully attentive to the thoughts that are arising, then they have to come up, because it's like children in the back seat. Dad, you're asleep at the wheel. Wake up. And we're going to argue until you wake up. And so if we're fully attentive, if we're fully making this moment about this moment, if we're fully giving respect to the thoughts, you'll notice they usually don't come. They're only coming, I would say for the most part, if not entirely, in order to wake you up to the fact that you're not awake. And if you were fully awake, they wouldn't need to come, because you'd be fully awake. It's the fact that you're falling asleep that generates these thoughts to come. It's completely natural to do that. We haven't been conditioned or taught to do otherwise. But that's, in my story, why the pyramids were built, to bring that on. Now, yes, it brought a lot of suffering to slaves, and so maybe they could have done it a different way. Where does that leave us? Well, every time that the ego tells you that you're good or you're bad, you realize you're not making this moment about this moment. You apply unconditional self-acceptance, unconditional positive self-worth, self-regard, and you humbly appreciate not knowing. And so that is really what's behind these questions about, did aliens build the pyramids? it's because we're not humbly appreciating not knowing. We can't know if the aliens built the pyramids. It's more than likely that slaves built the pyramids either before those aliens, after those aliens, or during those aliens. So to deny the misery of those slaves is disrespectful. Use the story as a way to point to higher principles. And when we do this, of course, we risk disrespecting the people who believe in the stories or the validity of the actual stories. So I try to pick stories that are not going to offend anybody. There's a lot inside of us that wants that creativity to bring us some kind of personal accolades, positive attention, the positive regard we didn't get as children, or the conditional positive regard that we got as children is trying to be recapitulated. It's all up to us in each of our body minds at this moment to give ourselves unconditional positive self-regard as best we can, or have compassion for the inability to do so, and to humbly appreciate not knowing. Every time we think we know, or think we need to know whether what we know is positive or negative, whether knowing would alleviate suffering or not, we can remind ourselves that if we actually knew, if we had that godlike intelligence, life would have no meaning. We would never make mistakes. We would have no opportunity to grow and synthesize and evolve. And so that is our practice. And we can say that the pyramids are there, at least in our story, to promote that.